Hey, what's up, everyone? Nicky Skevich here once again with Daily Fantasy Winners, and it's the next tournament for Tee to Green, and we've got the Waste Management Phoenix Open this week, and which is obviously in Scottsdale, Arizona, right next door to Phoenix. And so some details on this tournament, not too much to cover here from a DFS perspective. We've got a 130-person field event, slightly smaller than normal, but basically there's no difference when it comes to strategy. If you're wondering, yes, this is the tournament. You probably know this by now, but this is the tournament with the stadium hole, which is hole 16, the par 3. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is a par 3 where basically there's grandstands built around the entire hole, all the way around, and basically the hole looks like a stadium, essentially, with all the stands built around it. Fans, all pile in there, and they basically get drunk, and it's like one big party, and then they end up like booing bad golf shots, or they like go crazy when there's like really good shots hit. And some of the players, what they'll do is they'll like bring gifts with them, like free hats and sleeves of balls, and toss like free gifts like into the crowd, like as they like walk up after they hit their tee shots. And it's just a kind of one big party, and really the whole event is kind of one big party. There's plenty of places for the fans to to move around and about and everything like that. And so it's definitely one of the most fun events actually to watch on television. So if you're somebody that does PJ Daily Fantasy and you don't really watch many golf tournaments, but you kind of want to once in a while, this would be a tournament I would recommend you do it. This is definitely one of the better ones, and it's a nice build up to the Super Bowl to help distract you or something like that. So in any case, let's move on. And the one thing you do need to know, though, from a daily fantasy perspective, though, about this tournament is the tournament from a salary structure standpoint on DraftKings, it is really strange and is a mess this week. It's almost like how it was back in 2013. I'll get a little bit more into this once I get into the strategy segment, but that is going to be the one thing you're going to need to know about this tournament. But let's dive into some details about the golf course here, which is TPC Scottsdale, the stadium course. Par 71 tipping out at 7,266 yards. Even though there are only 3 par 5s on the course, there are 4 eagle holes. Numbers 3, 13, 15, and 17. 1 par 5 on the front, 13 and 15 are par 5s on the back, and number 17 is a short par 4. The par 5s are 558, 558, 553. And then 17 is 332, and so the longer hitters help with eagles here? Yes, they do, but it's not required. They'll more help. With hole 3, it more helps having a longer iron in than a fairway would, but it's not a big deal. 13, it definitely helps because there's a big long bunker protecting the green on the second shot coming in. Hole 15 is actually an island green, and so if some players are a little bit off target or a little bit shorter off the tee, they may want to play a little bit more conservatively. So it helps basically a little bit. In 17, you would definitely need to be a longer hitter to get an eagle. So let's see here. And there were actually some course renovations done here a couple of years ago, which was mainly done by repositioning some bunkers, and they redid the greens and things of that nature, which made it a little bit more difficult as well. So the scoring averages have been a little bit higher here, higher meaning worse scores over the last handful of years. And so, we're going to see about 5 eagles or so on each hole probably is what we'll see here at by the end of the tournament. So let's move on to the strategy, though. Not too much more to cover from the course specific. So there's 2 main parts here to the strategy, and the second part is more important than the first part, but we got to cover both. The first is the stats angle. So after compiling data over the last few seasons here at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, nothing was really popping out to me. I was actually getting somewhat frustrated since obviously you want to see an angle or a few stats just, jump out to you. And so essentially I took a break and went out to run a couple of errands. And, while I was doing this, I was trying to logically think about the course and why this was the case. And usually just regardless what the tournament is, when I analyze a course and tournament history data, I usually like to find the reasoning on why, the data is telling me this. Is it, the length of the golf course? Is it the weather conditions in this specific year? Is it the way the course is usually set up? There's a lot of different ways it can factor in. But usually, if the data is telling me something, I want to see why something's telling me this, in case if maybe there was like a 1 year or 2 years that it just kind of happened to show that it just might be more along the lines of variance. So you kind of gonna have to play around with it a little bit and see if there's some good logic here behind what the data is telling you and putting into the appropriate context. But in any case, After I started thinking about it a little bit more, and I was walking around the grocery store actually earlier, I was realizing this actually makes more sense, and the reason is because this course really is middle of the road in length. It's kind of average distance, par 71, 7,200 yards or so. The fairways are somewhat friendly, but there are 6 holes with water, and you can get into trouble off the tee, and especially if you blow it way offline and you're in the desert, it can be really penalizing because you're obviously in the desert, and there can be like cactuses and all kinds of stuff, and you can be in big time trouble, and so it can just be really penalizing. The greens are relatively just average in difficulty, and quite frankly, just by what I'm getting to here is, while this is one of the most entertaining tournaments of the year, there really isn't like a specific thing from a strategy standpoint of the course promotes a specific type of golfer. It just really doesn't. There's one little angle here though, from the statistics though. Of the strokes gained statistics, off the tee, approaching the green, around the green, and putting, approaching is the one that came up the most. It was not a big amount. It was only a little bit, but it comes up a little bit more often for the players at the top of the leaderboard, usually each year, especially over the last handful of years. And furthermore, I will also add on to this that proximity to the hole stood out a fair amount more than greens and reg percentage, which I think is a better set anyways. And that actually does make sense for this course in particular, because if you just missed the green here on a lot of these holes, you're going to be fine. Usually you're just off the green, which means you're in the usually you're in fairway, and there really isn't any rough at this course essentially. It's like Augusta. There's really very little rough here. The desert's really where you're in trouble, and the only real trouble you're going to get in by the greens are the green side bunkers, and there's a couple holes in the back where water comes into play by the greens, but it's pretty minimal. So it makes sense that why proximity to the hole plays a little bit more of an edge than the greens and reg percentage. So with your picks, just give a slight edge to the players who are maybe longer hitters from the Eagles' perspective, and then the strokes gained approaching the green and proximity to the hole. That's kind of the slight edge from a statistical standpoint, but it isn't a whole hell of a lot to go on here this week from that standpoint. Here's the second point, what I was talking about from strategy, and that is the salary structure, which I alluded to at the beginning of the video. If you, you opened up DraftKings and you took a look at the salaries and you're like, what the heck? How is Louis Oosthuizen 6,900 and Daniel Berger 7,000? Or how in the world is Phil Mickelson and Bubba Watson in the mid 8K range? If you're wondering why the heck it's this way, you should be thinking that, because it is really strange salary structure this week. And so if you take a look at our odds per dollar tab on DailyFantasyWinners.com, which I've updated a few times over the last couple days, ironing out a few kinks and everything like that. But if you take a look at it right now, you will notice how many there's quite a few people that actually pop out above some other people of lower prices over higher price players essentially. And so you should definitely check that out. And this is somewhat how DraftKings did their salaries in 2013. And actually, though, I will say this, though, after doing a little bit of research, it turns out that DraftKings is testing a few different salary methods here to start the 2017 portion of this season. And so I don't know how long they'll be doing that. I'm definitely not in the loop on those decisions. But in any case, I will say, though, searching around on Twitter and talking to Max, and he looked into it a little bit too, it seems like that this is what they're doing right now, at least. And so we just got to ride with the flow and tweak the strategy as we go along with it a little bit if we need to. And quite frankly, I'm kind of disappointed about this a little bit, just because there are some recommendations I would give DraftKings on things that they can tweak with scoring. But as far as the salary structure, I think they got it pretty good for most of last year, especially down the stretch last season. I like when they have the mid salary down in the mid 5K range, and it made a lot of those guys more playable. And Stars and Scrubs was more of an acceptable option, if you will, as opposed to balanced salary methods. And when it came to GPPs, and you could even do it in cash too as well. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. It just depends on the tournament and how it all works out and what the field is, of course. But in any case, yeah, it's just weird. And so that's the way we got to go by it. So basically what this means is there are definitely going to be some players that are cheap, that will be very highly owned, who I would recommend fading in your GPP lineups. I will have that list, of course, as always, on DailyFantasyWinners.com. Usually I'm done with all the picks type of stuff by by Wednesday early evening. I usually get started on finalizing the picks Tuesday night, and I usually take that into the day Wednesday and get it done by early Wednesday evening, which is usually when you should be actually starting to finalize your lineups anyways, and doing weather checks. Although weather really probably won't come into play too much here at Phoenix anyways, because it is Arizona and often very nice there, which most of us are definitely missing, is nice weather. So in any case, this will be your biggest angle in GPPs, quite frankly, though, is the fading of the lower salary, high owned players, and that will be more elaborate. I'll elaborate on that more at the website. So, okay, anyways. And as far as cash formats, I'll just say I don't see much of an edge this week other than what I mentioned from the statistics standpoint, which is pretty small, honestly. This is kind of a rough week for cash. Better week for GPPs, in my opinion. So on to the picks. You'll see three guys in the 11K range of Jordan Spieth, Hideki Matsuyama, and Justin Thomas. I think they're all going to be owned a good amount. I've consumed a decent amount of content, actually, in the last 24 hours, just curious what people are saying, because I think it's an interesting situation. You've got all three players that are in pretty good form, and some people have some, differentiating opinions, which of course is healthy and normal. But at the end of the day, I think they're actually just all going to be owned roughly the same amount and all pretty evenly, all things considered. Jordan Spieth, they're all in great form, like I said, but Spieth does have, the edge in the sense that he's probably the best player of the three. Hideki is obviously having a phenomenal year, and he definitely has the best course history in the 3 times he's played here each of the last 3 years. He has top 10s in all of them, and he won. He's the defending champion last year, of course, as well. And then you have Justin Thomas, who shot 59 a couple weeks ago, and he won the last 2 golf tournaments he played in, both in this year 2017. So obviously his recent form is pretty darn good, to say the least. So I think they're all going to be owned, and I think they're all great plays. I would give the slight edge to Jordan Spieth because I'd probably say he is slightly, the best player of the 3, but really we're splitting hairs here. And I don't have a strong lean here this week as opposed to maybe some other weeks. And I haven't had too much of a strong lean as from the most expensive players so far this year, and I still don't quite yet, but I will, I promise you, coming up here probably in one of these weeks coming up shortly. So, and as far as the picks, another pick I could give you, I know he missed the cut, but then again, pretty much everybody missed the cut last week. If you're wondering, by the way, in GPPs last week, or in cash formats too, basically, about 2% of lineups on DraftKings had all 6 guys make the cut at Torrey Pines last week. So if you were someone who was fighting for your life last week and just trying to cash, trust me, from a lot of people I've talked to, whether they were using our information or not at Daily Fantasy Winners, it was a tough week last week to get, to do well. So. But in any case, I'm not jumping off this guy for this week. It's Brooks Koepka at 9,100. I know he won here a couple of years ago, but that's really not the reason why I'm picking him. I think 9,100 is very affordable for him. Obviously, he has great eagle potential, fantastic tee to green game. And at the end of the day, actually, if you're asking me, when you ask me, for some of these young guys, what's like a certain player's ceiling, which is obviously, tough to predict. For Brooks Koepka, I really don't see any reason why he can't be like Dustin Johnson status. There's really no reason. He's absolutely phenomenal tee to green. The only real weakness in Koepka's game is his chipping and his scrambling, and basically his strokes gained around the green. And this is one of the least penalizing courses for around the green here at Phoenix, like I mentioned, because there's no penalizing rough. It's just greenside bunkers type of a thing. And so in any case, Koepka is the other pick, and then, of course, I'll have all my other picks over at DailyFantasyWinners.com in the forum, in the PGA section, of course. So that is it. Thank you for watching, and you can follow me at Nick Yuskevich on Twitter, and Daily Fantasy Winners at DFantasyWinners on Twitter, and then you can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well if you choose to do so. All right, good luck, everybody.